When Evil Lurks is a new possession movie that's getting a limited theatrical release right now and then debuting on Shudder at the end of October. This Argentinian horror doesn't shy away from the gore, so does the story work to enhance those visuals? When brothers Pedro and Jimmy discover that a demonic infection has been festering in a nearby farmhouse, they attempt to evict the victim from their land. Failing to adhere to the proper rites of exorcism, their reckless actions inadvertently trigger an epidemic of possessions across the rural community. Now they must outrun an encroaching evil as it corrupts and mutilates everyone it is exposed to, and enlist the aid of a wizened cleaner who holds the only tools that can stop this supernatural plague. Alright, so this is a Spanish language horror that's a pretty quick watch at just 99 minutes. And like the synopsis said, the story follows two brothers as they experience some extreme wonkiness near their farm. And by wonkiness, I mean some very disturbing visuals, like halves of people being discovered, or a gluttonous behemoth that is just full of festering wounds. There are dire warnings from an older woman who seems to be well versed in demonic possession. And more importantly, she has the correct ways one can be destroyed and all the incorrect actions that have to be avoided, or else tragic consequences are going to ensue. We then watch a lot of yelling and shouting from characters as they stressfully navigate some unfortunate events perpetrated by people who can't avoid the demonic force. Now, the thing I really appreciate about this story is that the possession works more like an infection rather than something we've seen in The Exorcist. The demon can spread simultaneously through bodies, causing all sorts of gruesome problems. And as this happens, a sort of chase and avoidance becomes the narrative vehicle. One of the brothers goes to rescue some family members, and then attempts to travel out of the town into isolation where hopefully the demonic forces can't reach. The practical effects throughout this horror are masterfully crafted. To say they're disgusting is a huge understatement. These are convincingly graphic and then wickedly grotesque, with imagery that's most likely going to create visceral reactions. Now, a couple of times I was squirming and trying not to vomit a bit because what we're shown is absolutely deranged and extremely creative. And almost all of the violence, it's brutal and vicious in nature, where anyone and everything can become a target. Nothing's off limits when it comes to who or what becomes possessed. And I know that can make it sound ridiculous or maybe stupid, but everything that does get infected is plausible within this world, so it's believable. And because of this, there will be some sequences that may make you want to turn away or even turn it off. Most of these moments aren't typically 100% in focus, but they're still clear enough that we can absolutely tell what's going on without having to infer anything. Now, some of the story execution I think is messy, where the lore doesn't always stick to the rules that it establishes. Some of it may go unnoticed because the tension that's just inherent because of the stressful premise that the demon could basically inhabit anything or anyone on a whim. We do finally get a literal list of rules to dealing with and conquering the demon, but that comes more than halfway through the film. So while the uncertainty of how and why things were happening before this was tense, it also felt though like the story could do anything it wanted without ramifications. And even then, at the end, the rules are broken without consequences again. So they seem more like guidelines or suggestions rather than actual rules. There's also a problematic narrative that focuses on autism and pretty much says that the autistic character has a broken brain, which then makes him way more susceptible to possession. This is a terrible and inaccurate stereotype to propagate, making this portion of the story feel like it comes from a very backward-thinking segment of the world, and certainly one that looks down on those on the spectrum. Now, something I do like about the story, and it may not be satisfying to everybody, but this has a very feudal feeling to everything. I mean, not so much that every bit of the tale seems pointless, just that there is an utter sense of hopelessness that permeates, creating a dark and distressing aura with a depressive feel that could stick with you for a bit. Now, I think if you're going to see this in a theater, the experience could be fun, especially as there are shared visceral reactions to what transpires on screen. I can imagine there will be collective gasps and even shouts of disbelief throughout, but this also does run the risk of dragging on with sagging momentum. That's mainly a result of this messy storytelling. When there are downtimes between gruesome action, this is when story elements they become convoluted, and you could even begin to feel the time. Now, for as invested as I was in the gore and practical effects, the story did sometimes present a challenge to my engagement. I wanted to be invested, but the thinness of the plot and lack of character development hindered my connection with the characters. So overall, When Evil Lurks excels when it's employing the horrifying and macabre practical effects, full of realistic stomach-turning gore. The story is mildly intriguing, but the progression is a little chaotic, leading to a convoluted narrative that doesn't stick to its own rules. The pace also drags unnecessarily, defying the stress that's brutally delivered from the violence. This is okay for a one-time watch, and the depressing tone, it might haunt you for a bit, but all in all, it's just a middling horror, accentuated by phenomenal practical effects. There's no sex, a little nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a ton of grotesque and brutal violence. I give When Evil Lurks 3 out of 5 couches. So what's a gory or maybe disturbing movie that you like to watch? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.